Hello and welcome to my Learn to Sew a Sundress for Your Punkin. Now this pattern was drawn up, if you even want to call it a pattern, it is so simple. I drew it up to encourage my non-sewing collectors to learn to sew so that they can make doll clothes for their dolls. So for any of you that do know how to sew, don't worry, this is a simple gathered skirt that we're making into a sundress, so it will be a breeze for you. So the supplies that you will need are a 4-inch by 11-inch scrap of fabric, approximately like a 12-inch, quarter-inch ribbon, a 4-inch piece of 1/8-inch elastic, that's the really skinny stuff, needle and thread, of course, a safety pin, a snap, some straight pins, and definitely you want a ruler or a tape measure. So I'm going to slide these to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and put my ironing mat down, and that's what we are going to work on. Now, the little dresses that we are making are this right here. Okay, and as you can see, it's a super simple gathered skirt with a ruffle on top that we just make into a sundress. So let's move little old Punkin Cookie off to the side here, and we will get started. Okay, so I decided to do some close-up with scrap fabric, a nice big needle, and colored thread, so you can see the stitches you will need to do. So the first one that I wanted to cover would be the whip stitch, which is your hemming stitch. So this is for your close-up view to learn how to do the stitch, and then you can go back and do it on your dress. So what we are doing, we are securing it on this fold over. You're going to grab just 1 or 2 threads of your base fabric, and at a slant, come underneath that turned under fabric and pull that through. Okay, right where you're at, go ahead and grab a couple threads, slanted up under the turned under fabric, and pull it through. Okay, so that is what is called your whip stitch. And as you can see over on this side, you barely see it, and that's how you hem the dress if you're going to go ahead and hem it. And this is how you'd hem a pair of pants. So there you go. I even taught you how to hem a pair of pants. Okay, the next stitch is going to be your back stitch. And this is if, let's say we are putting 2 seams together, right sides to right side. And here will be your seam. So this is how I explained. You're going in, you're coming up about 1/8 of an inch away. Now you can do this bigger. The smaller stitches will give you a more stable seam. So here you're going to go back in between those 2, put your needle in, come up. I don't know whether this is an 1/8, I think it's more of a 1/4 inch. Okay, and pull that. And why it's called a back stitch is because you're back stitching. So you're going to go back to where that stitch ends, put your needle in, come up ahead of that. So from needle entrance to needle exit, that's about 1/4 of an inch. So I guess from the thread to the needle exit is about 1/8 of an inch. But these don't have to be exact. Okay, so you're going to go back to where that ended, come up, Okay, and that is called a back stitch. Okay, and this is what it looks like on the other side. Okay, and see how nice and sturdy that is? And that is how they sewed back in the olden days. Now I'm going to go ahead and rip this out, and the last thing I'm going to show you is the running back stitch. And why we are doing this on the casing is not only it will take less time, but you don't need a terribly really strong seam for that casing. So this will save you some time. So what you're doing, this is called a running stitch or a basting stitch. So if you just want to hold the fabric together, okay, so that's all you're doing, in and out on the fabric, pulling that through. And then if you're doing a running back stitch, what you're going to do is you're going to do, I don't know, about 3 or 4 running stitches. Then you're going to back stitch so that you're securing the spot right there. Okay, if I can get my hands working, it might help. Okay, and then you're going to come up like you would in a back stitch. And then you'll go right back to your running stitch. So maybe about 4 of those. And why I chose to do this is because if you would do a straight back stitch, don't you love my videos? I show you all that can go wrong. Okay. So that was your running stitches. We're going to do a back stitch. And then you're back to your running stitch. So you're doing running stitch, 1 back stitch, running stitch, 1 back stitch the whole way across for your casing. Okay, so those are the 3 stitches you will need to do. Now, as I explained why, I'm just going to save time and do this. How about that? As I was saying, why I didn't just use a back stitch for the casing, I will show you here in a minute. Let's do a back stitch. Because when you gather this, see how those loops pop up? So you'd have those loose loops if you use that for the casing. Whereas if you use the running back stitch, you're only going to have that loose loop every so often. It's really up to you which one you want to use. You can experiment and see which one you like to use. See which one you like better. I just think you'll have less looping on these running stitches, plus it's a little quicker and you can get done with your dress even quicker. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your fabric, make sure it's nice and pressed flat. Now there are 2 different ways you can do a hem. I'm going to show you how to do a sewn hem, a finished hem on the bottom. But if you don't want to take the time to sew a hem, you can always do a raw edge like I did on this one. Okay, so that is just the edge. If you cut it cleanly, I can show you how you can fray the edge to get that. All you have to do is take your needle and you just grab one of the threads going lengthwise, which is your weft threads, and you just pull that out. And I would say maybe pull about 4 or 5 of them, and that'll give you the nice frayed edge. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to sew a finished hem. So what we are going to need is the roller, and we are actually going to I said 1/4 of an inch. I may even do, yeah, let's go do 1/4 of an inch for you guys. I don't want to do it too small and then you guys will have trouble. Okay, so you can measure it, you can mark it. From so many years of sewing, I usually just eyeball it. So you go ahead and you turn that under 1/4 of an inch and press that flat. Okay. And then you're going to want to, this is fun, trying to use this iron down here. Okay. Now, if you have a sewing machine, I highly recommend you use the sewing machine because it's a lot quicker and easier. All you need for this dress is a straight stitch, so it would be nice and easy. So you're turning that under twice to get a nice little rolled hem there. If you have a machine, all you want to do is stitch right along the edge here to secure that hem up. But I am actually going to show you how to whip stitch a hem. So if you don't have a machine, you're going to have to do it this way. Plus, if you don't want the stitching line shown on the outside of your dress, you would want to do it this way as well. Okay, I should have threaded a longer tail on my thread here, or my needle here, but I'm using what I was using before. Now, I would typically use a white thread for this to match the fabric, but I am using red, trying to make it a little more visible in the video for you. Okay, so you knot your thread. You have a double strand of thread on your needle. You are going to put the thread on the rolled hem part. Don't grab the base yet. Okay, so we're just taking it just right up on the edge of the rolled hem. Okay, and then we are going to take just a couple threads. You can see that. Couple threads of the base fabric. And you're going to slant your needle and come up from behind on the edge of the hem. Okay? And pull it tight. And you're going to do that the whole way down. Grab a couple threads, slant it down under the edge of the rolled hem, and the whole way down. And what that does is that gives you a nice hemmed edge. Now you may see some of your thread coming through there, but when you use a matching thread, it's not as noticeable. I'm just using the red so that you can see it a little better. So go ahead and just keep sewing down the length of the hem. After hand sewing this, you'll want to go out and buy yourself a sewing machine so you can do it up real quick. Now, don't worry about running out of thread. So we're getting close. Let me do one more stitch. Whoop. You want to keep your fabric nice and flat. Okay, so you came up on that edge of the hem. We're going to go from behind, go through it again, produce a loop, take your needle through, and pull it taut. And there you go. You just tied that off. So I'm going to go ahead and rethread this needle, finish off the hem, get us to the edge. Now, I usually, if I'm doing any hand sewing, I usually have a cake of beeswax to run my thread through. Obviously, if you don't sew a lot, you probably won't have that, so you can do, and the dress is for you. I wouldn't you can just use the old school technique of drawing it through your lips and putting some spit on that thread, and it'll keep the thread from tangling. I don't recommend that if you're making the clothes for someone else, though. I didn't trim off my thread there. Okay, back to work we go. And we're just going to keep going down until we finish the rest of the hem. Okay, so we're at the end. We're going to do the last stitch. Pull that a little too tight. There we go. And secure that off with a knot. Okay. And there you have your finished hem. Okay, so we can go ahead with the iron. A nice press. Okay, now we are going to move to this edge, which is where we are going to form the casing for the elastic. So we want to turn this down 5/8 of an inch, which would be about here. Now, I gave you the measurements to make a nice little short sundress. You can always make it even shorter and put in a pair of like little matching panties with it. Or you can make it longer and make a longer dress. That's where you would adjust it, make it wider. Now, since we're doing a really quick, simple dress, I'm not going to have you turn this under, and we're just going to do it nice and simple, okay? So I need to thread my needle again. Okay, so we are going close to this edge. Don't go too close that it's not going to hold the stitch. I will measure this for you. Okay, so that is 5/8 inch. Okay, so you're going to want, yeah, let's say a 1/2 inch down is where you want to put that stitch. Okay. Okay, so this is where you're going to be using that running back stitch. Now we're going to be stitching along that edge there the whole way to the end, tie off, and then you're going to come back and you're going to make a stitch parallel to that above it to form 2 rows of stitching that will give you a casing. So if you're like, oh, I have to sew this whole way across, that is an argument for getting yourself a sewing machine. Okay, so now we have our casing sewn. So we are going to take our safety pin, put it through the end of the elastic, and you are going to put the head of the safety pin. Unfortunately, I have shaggy edge, so this is going to be fun. You want the safety pin to go between these two stitching lines, okay? Because you want that little bit on the top. That is going to be the little ruffle on the top of your dress. Okay, now you just go ahead and you push it through and gather up that fabric. Now, before this disappears on this end, you come and secure that end. So what you're going to do is just go ahead and throw a couple stitches in there. Oops, and knot it. And what that will do is that'll hold that end of the elastic. Excuse me. Keep fishing that through. And as you can see, it's gathering it up nicely, plus it's giving you a nice little ruffle on the top for your dress. Okay, we are going to pull this through here. Now you can leave your pin on until you tack that edge. And that's what we want to do here, is secure that so that the elastic doesn't go through this side either. Okay, so then you take your two ends, stretch it out so it's nice and even, and you have the start of your little sundress. Now, the next thing we are going to want to do, and if you need to, you can use your straight pins to pin these together. You're going to want to put right side to right side. You're going to want to match the top, matching the elastic casings. And you can pin that so it'll stay there. Take your other pin, and we want to match the bottom hem. Okay. Now, this back seam, I would say to go ahead and do a back stitch on it, because you are going to have tension up here at the elastic. So I will show you how to do the back stitch the entire length. So we're going to come down here, and I'm just doing maybe like a 1/4 inch seam. So we're going to go ahead and tack that. We are going to come up about 1/8 inch. Okay, so this is where your knot is. This is where your thread is coming up. We want to go back to right in between these two. And then you're going to come up about 1/8 inch ahead of where that thread is. and pull that taut. Then you're going to go down, put your needle down in that at the end of that last stitch, bring it up 1/8 inch in front of where your thread is coming out. So you are back stitching all of these, and this is the most secure hand stitching you can do. Now we don't necessarily need it that secure down at this end, but up by the elastic we will need a nice secure seam so that when you're pulling on that elastic to get it over her hips, you won't have anything coming apart. So again, go back to that previous stitch, put your needle down in there, bring it up 1/8 of an inch. You see where the needle's coming through? See that shine? Ahead of where the thread is coming out. And you just keep doing that the whole way up. Shoot, and I'm going to run out of thread. So we're going to tie this off. Now, as I said, this is a super easy dress. So for those of you watching, you're saying, really? This is the pattern? Remember, I'm trying to get some of these non-sewers to hop on our wagon and sew some clothes. So when you have to start with a new thread, you're going to come back to that last stitch, put your knot down in there, come up ahead of where you tied it off, and just keep back stitching, not backstabbing, back stitching. I'm getting slap happy after doing these videos. Okay. And keep going up over top of the casing, making sure that you're getting all of that elastic stitched in there. Because that's where, and once you get to the elastic, you might actually have to pull it and then come up this way because you've got a lot of thickness here. Okay. Now, of course, if you're sewing this, you could sew it and serge the edges and, you know, make it as fancy as you want. But we're just trying to get a nice, simple little dress sewn up. So take that. We're going to leave some of the raw edges. Okay. So you sewed that, tied it off, and look what you have. You just sewed yourself a nice little, you can actually use this as a skirt. Okay, we're going to take poor little Cookie's dress off here. Whoop! So this is her bathing suit bottom. She must have been out swimming and just threw her dress on. Yes, my poor dolls are always sitting around with mismatched clothes, no underpants, and all kinds of stuff. Naked. Okay, so what we are going to do is now you can go ahead and place this on your doll. And as I said, you can always use it as a skirt. But using this as a skirt with that ruffle, it sort of rides up on her anyway. So that's how we are going to pull it up and secure it with this little halter strap, and it will become a sundress. Now, as you can see, it's a nice little short sundress for a cute little toddler. You could even make it even shorter and have a cute little pair of ruffly panties under here. You could make it even longer and bring it down like below her knees. So, how we are going to do this now. We are actually going to, this is the best way to do this instead of me telling you to put markings on your dress. You're going to take your ribbon. You're going to take one end. You're going to cut a nice little slant on it. And depending on how you want them to go, let me see how I have this. Okay, so I have the two longer slants on this one toward the middle. You could do it that way. You could do it the other way where the edge would be flat this way. Why don't we try it that way and then it'll be different. Now, depending on the length of your fabric, you could really make this nice and long if you wanted to. You can make it nice and short. You could take it where there isn't a tie. So it's up to you on where you want this at. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this and be very careful not to scratch at all. But you have that elastic there, so it sort of helps you a bit. So if you want, if you're scared to sew it on with your, let's just take her little, you can slide it off and then sew it so that it's not on your doll, so that you don't accidentally scratch her. So let's go ahead and knot this. And we can actually come in from behind if you'd like. And all we're going to do is just stitch this on here. So you want to do, I don't know, I always pick 3. So I put 3 nice stitches in there. And then we're going to go ahead and grab our snap. And we want the bottom side, not the real thick side, the thinner side. And we are going to go ahead and if you don't like sewing or working with snaps, you can always use Velcro for this. And we're just going to go ahead and stitch this little snap right on here. At this point, take your straight pin out. It's sewn on there. I'm just putting two stitches in each little hole. It's up to you. However you want to sew your snap on. And any other time, I probably would have used a nice royal blue to match the ribbon to sew this on, but I'm trying to do it in contrasting threads so you can see. And then you're just going to knot this off. Cut your thread. Now we get to put the dress back on her. Now you're going to take your ribbon. You're going to wrap that around her neck and then bring it back down here like a little cross. Okay? So then we can sort of adjust. If you need to, you can pin this where your snap's going to be. Okay? And you can come across here and and snip your other side. So yeah, you probably could use a 10-inch ribbon if you're looking through your stash and you have a ribbon you'd really like to use. And depending on the length of it, you can adjust that. Okay, again, we are threading our needle. Now, even if you sewed this by machine, this part, you would still be doing it by hand. Putting the ribbon and snaps. Okay. Whoop. Cookie's like, come on, Mama. You're taking too long. Okay. So, again, you can take it off your doll. Now, remember, this is going to be looping around this way. So you want your snap on the back of. And I am going to take my ribbon out, or my safety pin out. So I'm going to just, sorry I don't have any of my sewing marking pens down here, so we're just going to use a Sharpie. So you can mark that or leave your pin in. I have trouble working around the pins. So don't worry about, if you have a plain ribbon and you have a matching thread, you don't really have to worry about seeing this on the other side. You can always add a little embellishment, like I'm going to add this little red star after I'm done sewing this on, and then that way it hides your stitching. So, and there are so many little cute buttons out there. You just want to get ones that, actually, this is a little too small. I'd like to actually have a little star button that's a little bigger. So I might sew this on and then end up taking it off at some point later because I want a bigger one. But they have, as you can see, look how small this little thing is. And I actually have buttons that are even smaller than that. So, but you don't want something really huge and chunky on the front of our dress. So a nice little flat star would be really nice for this. So again, I'm just sewing on the snap. And before I tie this off, I'm going to just go ahead and I may have sewn it a little high, but I'm not going to fret because I think I'm going to go ahead and put this little itsy bitsy star on here. Yeah, you can barely see it. I really want a bigger one. But this is what I had in my stash, so this is what we're using for the video. So tie that, knot it off, snip it, and then guess what, ladies? You have a super simple and get it snapped, that is, sundress. And she's ready for the 4th of July. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And for all of you non-sewers, I hope this gets you excited to make some clothes. Thanks for watching.